It is time to tune up that band and get ready for another sweet Chinwag Sweet interview as part of our Being Proud series. Our series exploring LGBTQIA+ identities through the lens of wrestling and online content. This week we're bringing you something a little bit different and a little bit shorter. We are joined by Valerie Quartz of the company Daryl Apparyl, who have been making gear for independent wrestlers over the last roughly since about 2020. We are so thankful to them for joining us and getting this very different perspective that you might not normally hear about the wrestling industry. We hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome to Val from Daryl Apparyl. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute joy to have you with us and have you as part of this series, and to look a little bit differently as someone who is more involved on the outside of things.
Yes.
But first, though, we'll start off with our first question, as it has been for the rest of the series. What does it mean to you to represent the LGBT+ community in the world of wrestling?
It really means so much. I think I cycle through a lot of like hobbies and interests, and I think wrestling has really stuck because of the LGBT community with it. That's why it's been something that's stayed in my life, and I've gone from being a fan to working in the industry. I know that my story isn't a new one when I say that, like the Golden Lovers kind of brought me into to the awareness that this community existed. I was like, wait, wrestling is gay? I didn't know that.
As we have said with many people throughout the course of this series, wrestling is indeed very gay.
It has been confirmed. But yeah, that was something that made me be like, oh, I think this might be for me. And at that point, like, I knew that I was bisexual or pansexual, but I still felt like I was in a space that I wasn't allowed to identify as gay. Right. And at the time I was also married to a man. So it was very much that feeling of like, oh, I'm not gay enough to like be part of that community or to claim that. Which really, like, when you think about it, just stems from that like universal feeling of just that we all have about not being enough in like various areas of our lives.
Oh yeah, no, I've absolutely been there in terms of that feeling, and have had other people tell it to me.
Yes, of course. Yeah, like that's kind of a beautiful thing that we all experience that. And I think that's what makes the queer community in wrestling like such a special connection, that you have all these people who are feeling these feelings in some form and are also connecting to this art form in similar ways. But yeah, I mean, we all know it's no secret that Twitter can be a very negative cesspool of a place at times.
That could be one way of putting it.
But it honestly, for me personally, and the like people that I've grown close to or people that I interact with on a more regular basis, it was common for me at first, my first impression was I'm meeting other people who are interested in building each other up and validating each other when we're having these similar experiences.
No, I totally get that, and that has been very, very much a part of my experience within the, I guess I'm going to say the queerer side of the wrestling community.
Yes. Yeah, I call it like the little like gay corner of wrestling.
Yeah. So then next, I know this might be a little bit more of a tenuous question for you, but do you think that for yourself working in wrestling or as a gear maker specifically, which is what you do by trade, has that helped you explore yourself or your identity?
I'm very much a people person, and I learn new things about myself and feel more connected to myself through connections with others. I've always been like that. So I would say absolutely. I oftentimes find myself more excited to work with like queer and gender nonconforming clients, and they end up being some of my favorite projects. And I think that comes from like the desire to help these people express and explore their identities that maybe they weren't able to do until more recently in life. As a gear maker in general, like my goal is to help people tell these stories of these characters or these ways that they want to be perceived or represented. And wrestlers put a lot of work into that. So then when you have the very genuine aspect of somebody who is queer or gender nonconforming, and they want to be like loud and proud about that, or even like maybe just like maybe put like a flag on their gear, something like that. Like those little touches like mean so much to me. And yeah, that makes me feel more connected to the client, my work, myself. And like, I think that's where like my company's tagline is pro wrestling gear with heart. And that's where that like really rings true.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. But just in general, like wrestling is it's an art form. It's a creative thing. And even people who aren't wrestlers, like so many people interact with it so creatively. The amount of like different types of artists that I've seen on wrestling Twitter is just so cool. And before I was gear making, I actually had a project that went on last year called the Tarot Supercard Project.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And that one was, I kind of organized a group of, I believe it was 35 different artists. And we each kind of brainstormed what tarot cards would be represented by each wrestler. And we made this tarot deck, and all the proceeds went to the Kaleidoscope LGBT Youth Center in Ohio. And that was really my first time like stepping in and interacting with the community in a creative way instead of just like kind of consuming wrestling.
Yeah. Now that's absolutely amazing. And it is amazing hearing that kind of move, those small moves to go from one place to the next and finding your little space.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then moving on next, kind of connected to this. How did you start making your first moves towards getting involved in gear making?
Oh, this is where I get to tell my origin story.
Yes.
So I started off making miniature costumes for the like stuffed cat Daryl that Hiromu Takahashi made famous in New Japan.
We love Daryl.
Yeah, we love Daryl. So I started off just making like little jean vests and different costumes. I was an elementary school teacher at the time, and I was teaching 4th grade, and Daryl was like our little class mascot, like little like comfort buddy. And the kids got a kick out of me making outfits for him, and they would bring in like doll clothes for him. I'd start making custom ones. And then I'd take him to wrestling shows dressed as like the wrestlers that I was like excited to see on the show.
Yeah.
So yeah, that ended up growing into like a niche little Etsy shop, and I tabled some conventions like WrestleCon and StarCast. Mm-hmm. But I definitely hit a point where I wanted to do more. Only so many people have Daryls, and and to be completely frank, after a while, I did get contacted by New Japan, who was not super excited about me. It's like, oh, you can't make Ibushi shorts and sell them. I'm like, I guess that's fair. But yeah, so that kind of like in like early 2020, I decided to go into gear making. And that was, of course, a journey. I know so many people have this story where it's like early 2020, I decided to do this. And then, oh, no. So it was a little rocky, but like it really did give me time to just focus on just the gear making aspect. And Jody himself was my first client who I knew from wrestling with Party Hard Wrestling here. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. But things really started to take off for me last September when MV Young, unfortunately for him, got his gear stolen. Fortunately for me, I was able to be like, let me make you new gear. And yeah, it was really cool because he decided to just like take a chance on me. I really hadn't done anything other than making gear for Jody and like one other person at that point. And yeah, that's how I got into that.
Well, there we go. If we ever need another reason to tell people to like MV Young, we can use that now as well. So then moving on next, for you as a person, as a member of the LGBT plus community, and also as part of the wrestling community, how do you think wrestling has become a more queer friendly space?
I mean, just even in the time that I've been watching, which like I said, it's not too long, just about like 4 years, we just see more and more representation. And as I mentioned, like the Golden Lovers may have brought me into wrestling, but I can very understandably see the viewpoint that it's like queer baiting to a point, like since the actual romance is danced around, or there's a term like he's my best friend, like okay. But now we're in a place where we have, you know, people like Effie being like just so obnoxiously loud about being gay in wrestling, and it's beautiful and I love it. And like booking shows with queer talent who get to celebrate that part of their identity. But I love how it's like really started to extend to crossovers and blendings of communities, like having drag queens like Pollo Del Mar, Washington Heights as performers and hosts. And then of course I'm like so excited for Paris is Bumping, like Billy Dixon's.
Oh yeah, we absolutely
ball.
love every time that comes around.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for it. So like it's like it's starting to move beyond like celebrating wrestlers as talent and bringing in like all parts of the gay community as it exists already. So it's like you're doing some building but also collaborating, and it's just it's an exciting time. But yeah, no, and as I mentioned that I like started really making gear, that things started to take off with MV, I feel like my saga and my involvement in the wrestling community is still unfolding, where I've begun to like sponsor like the polyam cult shows, and the most recent one I've actually been helping to like organize, and that's been so special to me because, as I said, like MV like took a chance on me, and I really believe in what he's doing.
Yeah, it's really nice to kind of have that like feeling almost like kind of repaid back to you.
Yes, absolutely. To like to repaid back to me. It's like just like such a positive cycle where I get to like, I feel lucky to get this chance to like nourish a community that's also been like good to me and to be like actually involved. So yeah, so my story is still unfolding, you know, Gearmaker and Beyond, I guess.
I was going to say, how does it feel for you having kind of gone from that kind of almost like wrestling arts and crafts world to then being asked to be involved in organizing shows?
It's extremely humbling. It's extremely like, I feel so lucky, you know, like I feel like these are like kind of like the dream jobs that like when you're in like first grade, it's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's like, I want to make wrestling gear. Like, oh, that's cute. But like, how many people are going to end up doing that, you know? So actually getting to not only like make gear, but like being asked to like be involved in these shows. And like, I work with Wrestlers Lab as well as kind of like we just like, it's just that opportunity to support each other, and just community is so important to me. So I just like, it just gives me all the warm fuzzies.
The fuzzies are an important part of this experience. Yes. So then just going on, what would be your message for those who are interested in getting into making gear?
I would say the most important thing is to be patient with yourself. I'm really only like just over a year into doing this, and I so many times have struggled with imposter syndrome, and there's so much I still don't know how to do, and there's so much that I can do but wish I could do quicker. There's a lot of negative thoughts that can get in the way. So like really just be patient with yourself. Remember, it's all part of the learning process. You will get better, not as quickly as you want to, but that's how it goes. But again, like community is just so important. There aren't really like gear making classes at like community college or rec centers. So like I had to rely on being able to ask other gear makers questions, and I still do. I have a mentor who's amazing, Kel Rose. She's Nyla Rose's wife and Gearmaker.
Yep.
And she's been such a support to me. We just recently, I took a trip in person to go work with her and collaborate on Candy Lee's gear, which I believe will be debuting at Paris's Bumping. I'm very excited about. Yeah. And we're both part of the Closet Champion Discord, which has a really welcoming community where you can share your work, ask questions, feedback. And so like, I honestly, that's just patience with yourself and don't be afraid to ask questions. Like you'll find your people.
Absolutely. No, that patience is so important to learning anything, and I can vouch for it.
Yes. Again, it's even if it's not a specific thing that like people have experienced, it's a very universal feeling of imposter syndrome, of like frustration, and like we can all kind of support each other through that.
Yeah, absolutely. So then just moving on to our last question here, which is what would your message be for any members of the LGBT plus community who feel that wrestling might not be open to them?
Again, the same thing that I said with people getting into gear making, that you will find your people. If you are feeling excluded right now, then it's possible that maybe people you have interacted with are not the kindest, and we do exist. I have seen so many examples, again, like I said on Twitter, of people being unkind, but I've seen people being kind and building up. And so just like really look for that, really be open to like seeing who is out there being positive and being accepting, and like just try. I know it's hard, but don't be shy. There really is something for everyone. And I think that just, again, be patient, don't give up. You're going to find your people. Everyone is always welcome to message me and say hi at shows.
No, absolutely. I mean, we've been big on saying that the queer wrestling world has kind of created its space, and obviously anyone is welcome in it. And there are so many amazing people out there for anyone to find. Yes, absolutely. Not least with shows restarting up and companies like Wrestlers Lab. Any single thing that Effie does. Yes. And like, again, like with the polyam cult parties, like polyam cult parties, like, Paris is bumping. It's just getting bigger and bigger by the moment. Yes, absolutely. It's a good time to be a wrestling fan. It is a very good time to be a wrestling fan, in my opinion. But that brings us through with our questions. So just quickly, where can people find you? My personal Twitter is Valcano, Valcano. And then everything for Daryl Apparyl, you can find darylapparyl.com, Daryl Apparyl on Twitter and Instagram. That's DARYL, APPARYL. And again, don't be shy. Say hi. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Thank you for having me. This has been the Sweet Chinwag podcast. This has been Val from Daryl Apparyl, and we would like to say thank you so much for listening, and we hope that you join us in the next one. Goodbye.